Right, it is now 1 o'clock by the clock on my computer. Thank you for coming. Welcome to this witness handling session. Steve, can you tell us a little bit about what is about to happen?
Yes, certainly. Well, hopefully all of you have seen the short case study that I know was posted up for you to have a look at. So you'll know that what we're going to do is some witness handling in relation to a case of burglary, where the complainant in the case is a lady by the name of Doris Haines, and Doris is going to be played by Lynda Gibbs, who is Dean of the ICCA. The burglar, or as Steve probably would prefer, the defendant, is being represented by my own friend, Mr. Wells, whereas I will be appearing on behalf of the prosecution. As you probably know from the case study, the issue in the case is one of identification. There's no dispute that there was a burglary. The only issue is who was the burglar, and the defendant, of course, says it was not me. So the way that this session is going to work is that the first thing that will happen is that Doris will be examined in chief by me as prosecution counsel. And my job, therefore, is, as best as I'm able, to try and elicit from her the story in a way that hopefully can be easily followed. And when I'm asking those questions of Doris, there is one very important rule in relation to that examination. And that is that I'm not allowed to ask any leading questions at all in relation to anything that is an issue in the case, or indeed might be an issue in the case. And when I talk about a leading question, essentially what I mean is that I'm not allowed, or I shouldn't be, asking a question that actually gives the answer to the witness. The whole idea of an examination in chief is that the story itself, the evidence itself, should come from the witness rather than from the barrister. And of course, if essentially I was giving the answers to the witness, then her evidence is likely to have very little weight in the scheme of things. So it's a very important rule of practice. Having said that, very often there are lots of things that are not an issue between the prosecution and the defense, and when you're conducting an examination in chief in those circumstances, it's a very good idea, very good technique in those circumstances to ask a leading question, because it helps the story itself, and it helps in terms of getting to the issue much more quickly. And so the examination in chief, you will notice, will hopefully replicate a real trial situation in the sense that the questions that will be asked will involve a mixture of leading questions and non-leading questions as and where appropriate. One rule is the nearer you get to the incident, the nearer you get to what the issue is, the much more careful you have to be in terms of the questions that you ask. Then Steve will cross-examine Doris. And you'll notice that the technique that Steve adopts will be very different. I anticipate that many of the questions that Steve will ask, if not most of them, will in fact be leading questions. So completely the opposite to the way in which you should embark upon an examination in chief. The reason that he will do that is because by asking leading questions, what he's seeking to do is to use the framing of those questions as a means of controlling the witness and as a means of controlling the answer that she gives. and hopefully, if we've got some time at the end, we'll discuss further with you the different types of questioning. So hopefully you'll get a real sense of what goes on in a trial. We're of course not in a courtroom today. In fact, we're not even in a room together. But having said all of that, hopefully nevertheless you'll still find it quite useful.
And what we would like you to do, please, is to sit as the jury. Steve has said that the only issue in this trial is, has Doris Haines accurately identified Edward Fisher? There's no issue as to whether there was a burglary or anything like that. The question for you is, by the end of this, have you been satisfied so that you are sure that Doris Haines correctly identified Edward Fisher as the burglar? And we will be asking you about that at the end. So, Steve, I think we're ready to start.
Do we have Doris? Is she sat where she needs to be? Aha. There she is.
Steve?
Yes, I think Doris has been to the hairdresser, Steve. Mrs. Haines, would you give the court your full name, please?
Doris Haines.
I think, Mrs. Haines, you live in the village of Forsley, is that correct?
I do.
And specifically, I think you live at Home Cottage, which is on Main Street in Forsley.
That's right.
Now, as a matter of interest, Mrs. Haines, how long have you been living in Forsley?
46 years.
That's a long time.
It is a long time.
And in that time, have you got to know various residents of the village well?
Oh, yes, dear. I know everybody.
Talking of everybody, do you know Hannah Fisher?
Yes, dear.
And Hannah Fisher, I think, is the postmistress of the Forsley Post Office. Is that correct?
That's right.
She actually lives in the post office premises or above the post office premises. Is that right?
She does.
Do you know who she lives there with?
She lives there with her children.
How many children does she have?
3.
I think there's William. Is that correct?
Yes, he's the oldest.
There's a daughter, Sophie.
Yeah.
17.
She's the youngest.
And the third one is who?
Edward.
Do you happen to know how old Edward is?
Well, he'll be around 18 or 19, about the same age as my grandson would have been.
When you say Edward, of course, you mean the defendant in this case, Edward Fisher.
I do.
How well do you know Edward?
Very well.
Why is that?
Well, he was friends with Hugh.
Who's Hugh?
My grandson.
And you say he was friends with Hugh. Through what exactly? How was it that they became friends?
Hugh spent a lot of time at my house before we lost him, and he and Edward played together quite often at my house.
When you say your house, which house do you mean?
At my cottage in Forsley.
Home Cottage.
Home Cottage.
Now, you just said a moment ago, Mrs. Haines, that you had lost Hugh. What do you mean by that?
Well, Hugh died, I'm afraid, in a terrible car accident when he was 15.
he suffered head injuries, as I understand it. Is that correct?
He did.
And the tragic death of your grandson led you, I think, to take up a charitable concern. Is that right?
That's right. I'm now chairwoman of the local Headway Association, which is a charity.
And what is the purpose of Headway?
It raises money to support those who suffered with head injuries, lots of which are caused by road traffic accidents.
Would I be right in thinking that part of your fundraising involves an annual sale that takes place in the village? That's
right.
And for how many years has there been an annual sale in the village?
4 or 5 now. 4, 5.
When you raise money, what sort of amounts of money does the sale tend to raise?
Well, it goes up every year, over £10,000.
How well publicised is the event?
Oh, very widely. We have posters in all the local shops, the butchers, the bakers, the post office. Everybody knows about it.
£10,000 is a lot of money. When you say £10,000, are you talking cash?
Oh, always cash.
And when the sale has finished and you have the takings, so to speak, where eventually do those monies go?
Into the post office, into the Headway account.
So you have an account set up at the local post office, is that right?
That's right.
And are you a signatory of the account?
Yes, I am, and Lizzie, who's my neighbour.
Yes. Now let's just talking about Lizzie just for a moment, if I may. You say Lizzie is your neighbour. I think Lizzie lives in the cottage at the end of your garden in Rose Cottage. Is that correct?
She does.
But she's also someone that works with you at Headway.
Yes, Lizzie's the treasurer, and I'm the chairwoman.
Now, in 2019, that sale, I think that sale did, forgive me, took place on Friday, the 22nd of November. Is that correct?
That's right.
Where did it take place?
At a local hotel where we took all the things that we'd collected, which are second-hand clothes and toys, but quite expensive things, and then we held the sale on the Friday night.
What were you intending to do with those takings?
Well, we do the same thing every year. Lizzie counts it.
What is that?
Lizzie and I count the money. Lizzie writes it down. She puts it in the cash tin, and I take the cash tin home, and then I take it to the post office the next morning.
In relation to the post office, 2 days before the sale, on Wednesday, the 20th of November, did you go to the post office?
Yes, I did.
Why?
Well, I went to get my pension. I do that most weeks.
When you were there, what did you do?
I got my pension.
From whom?
From Hannah.
That being
Hannah Fisher.
Did you talk to Hannah at all?
I did. I talked to Hannah about the fact I'd be coming on Saturday morning with the tin, the cash tin and the takings.
Who was there in the post office at that time?
Well, Hannah, some very noisy boys who'd been playing football, and Edward.
Edward? Edward who?
Edward Fisher.
I'll move on, if I may, then, to the 22nd, the day of the sale. And as a matter of interest, where did you hold the sale that particular Friday?
Oh, do you know the name of the hotel has gone out of my head? It's a local. It's a very popular place.
Well, let me help you. It was the Falcon Hotel.
That's the one. That's the one.
It's a long day, I think, the sale. Is that right?
Oh, yes. It's a lot of setting up, and we don't finish till quite late.
What time did you finish on Friday, the 22nd of November?
Oh, after 10:30, I didn't get home till 11:30.
Now, before you went home that night, you've already told us that you would always take the takings home with you, having counted them all up.
Yes, I take them. I don't give them to Lizzie.
At the end of the sale on the Friday night, did you tally up the monies that you got from the sale?
We did.
And can you remember how much it was?
Not off the top of my head, dear, no.
Well, I think Lizzie actually made a note of the takings. Is that right?
She did. She always does that.
So she actually writes down the figure.
Yes.
And I know there won't be any dispute about this. The takings for this particular sale were over £10,000. There were 11,785.
Oh, yes, it was our best ever year.
So all of those monies went into what exactly?
Into a little black cash tin.
And that black cash tin went home with you?
Yes.
What time did you get home then that night?
About 11:30.
When you got home, what did you do with the little black tin?
I left it on my dining room table so I wouldn't forget to go to the post office on Saturday morning.
Locked or unlocked?
Locked.
What did you do with the key?
The key was in my handbag, which I keep next to my bed.
We have a plan in this case, Mrs. Haines, and I'm going to ask you to, I know you have a copy in front of you, well, at least I hope you have, Mrs. Haines. Do you have a copy?
I have.
This plan, I think, was actually drawn by Lizzie. Is that correct?
Yes, it was.
But does it look familiar to you?
Yes, it does. Yes.
I just want to look at it together, if we may, for a moment. You just said a few seconds ago that you left the black tin in the dining room. Is that right?
That's right. That's the middle room and the ground floor of my cottage.
So as we look at the plan together, at the bottom of the plan, we can see the dining room to home cottage in the middle. Mm. Is that correct?
Yes.
Immediately in front of the dining room, there are two dots in two boxes. Can you see those?
Yes.
You know what they're meant to be?
Those are my French doors.
In relation to the doors, do they open inwards or outwards as a matter of interest?
They open outwards into the garden.
How easy are they to open?
Not very. The handle's very stiff.
When you went to bed that night, did you lock those doors?
Well, I think so, but I can't remember. I was very tired.
Now, immediately outside of those French doors, on this plan, there appear to be, well, it's written there, two big red dots and lights. Mm. What are those?
Those lights come on sort of automatically if somebody stands in the garden, or if I go out into the garden and it's dark, they come on. They're very clever.
How bright are they?
Oh, very bright.
Now, immediately after the security lights, we can see your garden. If I can just go to the right for the moment, we can see a pavement, which says pavement, and then to the right of that we see Main Street. There's a street lamp there on the plan. How many street lamps are there close to your address then on Main Street?
2. There's one to the side of my kitchen, and there's one sort of in between mine and Lizzie's garden.
I see. Now, talking of Lizzie's garden, Lizzie, of course, as you told us earlier, lives at Rose Cottage. Is that correct?
That's right.
Are you able to get to Rose Cottage from your garden?
Yes, there's a gate and we never close it.
I see. And just for the sake of completeness, out of interest, for no other reason, we can see the post office neatly drawn there on, rather confusingly, Mains Lane. Is that right, Mrs. Haines?
Yes, there's Mains Lane, Main Street. We're not confused in Fawsley.
I see. Just as well, perhaps. Now then, you were telling me that you went to bed, and your bedroom, is that upstairs?
Yes.
Were you able to get to sleep?
Oh, straight away. I was exhausted.
And for how long were you asleep?
Well, a few hours, but then I was woken up.
By what?
And there was a noise in my dining room downstairs.
What type of noise, do you know?
Well, I didn't know what it was at the time, but I soon found out.
What did you find out?
Well, I went downstairs and I actually thought I'd left the French doors open. And then I got downstairs and I noticed there was somebody in my dining room.
Now, I'm just going to pause there, and I want to just take this carefully, if I may, Mrs. Haines. When you got downstairs, the room that you went into was which room?
My dining room.
You say that there was somebody there in the dining room.
Yes.
Where exactly in the dining room was that person?
Near my French doors.
Do your French doors have curtains?
Yes, they do, but they were open.
The person that you saw by the French doors, male or female?
Male.
Are you able to say how tall this male was?
Oh, I'd say 6 feet tall.
What was he wearing?
He was wearing one of those blue hooded tops, some dark trousers, a pair of training shoes, and one of those rather padded jackets.
Let me just take that in turn, if I may. You say dark trousers. Are you able to say specifically what colour those trousers were?
Well, I think they were black.
And you said something about trainers. Do you know what colour they were?
They weren't quite as dark. I'd say grey.
The jacket. What sort of jacket?
Well, I specifically remember the jacket because I've had to buy one of these coalface type jackets for my granddaughter. They're very expensive, and I remember it was the same. It had the same emblem.
And what was that emblem?
I think it's coalface or coal play or something.
when you were interviewed by the police about this, I think you made a statement to the police. Am I right?
I did.
And when you made your statement to the police, which I think was on the 23rd of November, were these events fresh in your mind?
Oh, yes.
And would you say about your recollection that it was better then or better now?
Probably better then.
Would you like to refresh your memory from the statement?
Yes, please.
I wouldn't think Mr. Wells has any objection to that. Thank you. Mrs. Haines, if you wouldn't mind, if you could go to just bear with me one, Mrs. Haines. If you could go, please, to the 3rd page of that statement.
Yes.
And there is a paragraph that begins, "When I got into my dining room." Can you see that?
Yes.
I'm going to ask you, please, to read to yourself, in other words, not out loud, that paragraph in order to refresh your memory.
Oh, yes, I see it now. North face.
North face. Forgive me. What is
North face? Is the emblem on the puffy jacket.
I see. Now, you saw the male, you told us, stood by the dining room doors. Did he see you?
Yes, and I asked him not to hurt me, and when he saw me, he turned away very quickly.
He turned away very quickly. Where did he go?
He ran out into my garden, and the lights came on.
Which lights?
Those lights I was telling you about that come on in my garden, either side of the doors.
Who was that person?
It was Edward.
How do you know?
I know him.
What sort of view of his face did you have?
Well, I think it was quite a good view of his face with the lights, and he turned away quickly, but I recognised him.
Which part of his face did you catch?
The right side of his face.
Who did he look like?
Well, he looks like his father. His father's no longer living at the post office.
When he left and he'd gone, how were you feeling at that stage?
Very shaken.
Where was the box?
The box had gone.
The box had gone from where?
My table.
Who took it?
Well, Edward, I assume.
Now, you called the police?
I did. I had to go and get my phone out of my handbag, but they came very quickly.
Yes. Yes, thank you very much, Mrs. Haines. Just stay there, please. There may be a few questions.
Thank you.
Mrs. Haines, I'm going to ask you some questions on behalf of Edward Fisher, the defendant in this case. If we can go back, please, right to the beginning of the evidence you've just given. You've told us that you've lived in Fawsley for 46 years. That's right, isn't it?
Yes.
And what you said was, I know everybody in the village, that is.
Mm.
Yes. And I think it's fair to say that everybody in the village knows you, don't they?
Well, I think so.
Yeah. And well, what with organising these big sale events that you do and that sort of thing, you're something of a local celebrity, aren't you?
Well, I don't know about that, dear, but I think most people know who I am.
Yes. And your house, home cottage, is right in the middle of the village, isn't it?
Yes.
And fair to say it's a pretty cottage?
Very.
It's a building that everybody in the village knows.
Yes, we have open gardens in Forsley, and mine's always part of that.
And everybody in the village knows that you live there. That's right, isn't it?
I think so.
Now, you were telling us how you know Edward Fisher. You told us that he used to play with your grandson, Hugh.
Mm.
Now, the only times that you saw Edward playing with Hugh was when Hugh was at your house. That's right, isn't it?
Yes, or when I had to go and get them in for some lunch or something from when they were playing outside.
Hugh didn't live at your house, did he?
No.
So he wasn't there all the time by any means?
No.
Now, you told us that very sadly you lost Hugh when he was 15 years old.
Mm.
Now that's, what, 4 or 5 years ago?
Mm.
Yes. And do you remember that when you made your statement to the police, and you told the police about Edward Fisher, you said, "I have not seen him very regularly over the last 5 years."
Mm.
Now that's right, isn't it?
Yes, because I don't have Hugh anymore, and I think Edward's gone to university.
Yes. So you've really not seen him very much at all over the last 5 years.
Well, not regularly. I do see him in the post office from time to time.
Yes, you've told us that you go to the post office every Wednesday to collect your pension.
Mm.
And is it fair to say that from time to time you might see Edward there?
Yes.
Now, when you went there to collect your pension on the 20th of November last year, it was unusually busy, wasn't it?
Well, there were some very noisy boys who had just come off the football pitch, and they were talking about protein or something.
Yes. So I suppose they really rather grabbed your attention, didn't they?
Well, I couldn't hear myself think, dear.
No. And in addition to that, of course, you were trying to carry on a conversation with the postmistress, weren't you?
Yes.
So I'm going to suggest you can't really be sure that Edward Fisher was there in the post office that Wednesday.
Oh, no, I am sure.
Well, again, you've already told us that you made a statement to the police on the 23rd of November.
Mm.
So that's the day after the sale.
Mm.
The day leading on from the night during which the cash tin went missing.
Yes.
So it was all much fresher in your memory at the time when you made that statement.
Probably.
And when you made that statement to the police, you told a police officer what had happened.
Hmm.
And the police officer wrote it down.
Yes,
Or
he
perhaps
showed it to me.
the officer typed it, yes?
Yes.
And then when it was finished, you were given an opportunity to read it, to check that it was all correct and that you hadn't missed out anything important.
Yes.
And when you'd done that, you signed it at the bottom of each page, didn't you, to confirm that it was correct and that nothing important had been left out?
Yes, there was a lot of signing.
Yes. Have you got a copy of that statement there in front of you?
Yes.
I'd like you, if you would, to look at the second page of the statement.
Mm-hmm.
And would you look, please, at the last paragraph on that page that says, I remember Edward Fisher from the time he used to come to my house.
Mm.
Yeah. Would you just read out to us the second sentence in that paragraph, the one that starts right at the end of the first line?
It says, I have not seen him very regularly over the last 5 years, but I think he was in the post office on Wednesday, the 20th of November, 2019, when I collected my pension.
So that's what you said to a police officer on the Saturday, the 23rd, just 3 days after you had been in the post office.
Mm.
You said, I think he was in the post office on Wednesday the 20th.
Yes, I think he was.
And now you're telling us you're sure he was in the post office that day.
Yes, I'm sure he was.
Well, which is it? Do you think he was, or are you sure he was?
It's both. I think he was there. I'm sure he was there.
I'm going to suggest to you that you're mistaken, and that in fact, Edward Fisher wasn't in the post office that Wednesday.
Well, I think he was.
Let's move on to Friday the 22nd of November. You told us it was a long day.
A long day.
For you, there was a lot of setting up. You didn't start until late.
We didn't start the sale.
I'm so sorry, I'm being stupid. What I meant to say is you didn't finish until late.
No.
And you didn't get home until 11:30.
That's right.
Now, that's very late for you, isn't it?
It's very late for me, dear.
That's later than you would usually go to bed.
Very much so.
So you were asleep soon after midnight.
Mm.
And then you heard a sound.
In my dining room.
Yes. Now, you live alone, don't you?
Yes.
Very unusual for there to be sounds in your house at night.
Well, it has been since my husband died.
That must have been very worrying for you to hear something.
Yes, I thought I might have left the doors open and they were bashing together.
You were so worried, in fact, that you went straight down the stairs.
That's right.
You didn't take the time to pick up your handbag that had your glasses in it, did you?
No.
So you went straight down to the ground floor of your house and you looked into the dining room.
That's right.
Without your glasses on.
That's right.
And you usually wear your glasses for everyday vision, don't you?
Usually.
Now, the light in your dining room wasn't on, was it?
No, but my glasses I wear for driving when I still do that, which is not very often, and long distances. I'd say that my eyesight is quite good.
Yet you still have to wear the glasses when you're driving.
I don't drive very often anymore, dear.
The light wasn't on in the dining room.
No, but the lights were on in my garden afterwards.
So the lights were on in your garden afterwards, but not at this time when you first saw this figure in your dining room.
No, but there's a street light that brings some light into my house, the one that we saw on the map.
So we can see two street lights on the map. Have you got that in front of you?
Yes.
One of them is close to your kitchen, isn't it?
Yes.
But your kitchen is in between that light and where you saw the person in your dining room.
Yes, but my house is fairly open plan. It's not, and there are doors, and it's not a completely bricked up. There is one that comes in.
Sorry to interrupt. The other street lamp is the whole length of your garden away from the back of your house, isn't it?
Yes.
So I'm suggesting to you that there wasn't much light in your dining room, was there?
The lights in my house weren't on, no.
You said you saw this figure. And what you said to us was, when he saw me, he turned away very quickly.
That's right.
And once he turned away from you, he had his back to you, didn't he?
Well, he ran away.
Again, if we're looking at the map, he ran through your dining room to the French doors that we can see on that plan.
Yes.
And when he was doing that, he had his back to you.
Yes.
He carried on straight down your garden path.
Well, I think so.
Still with his back to you.
Yes.
And through the gate into Lizzie's garden.
Well, I imagine that's where he went.
Still with his back to you.
But I wasn't watching.
So the only time that you saw his face at all was in that moment before he very quickly turned away from you.
Yes.
You say that Edward Fisher looks like his father.
Well, I think he does.
His father hasn't been around for quite some time, has he?
No, dear. But remember, I've lived here for 46 years.
I'm going to suggest to you that, in fact, Edward Fisher doesn't look much like his father at all.
Do you know his father, dear?
At the time that you came down your stairs and looked into that dining room, you were scared, weren't you?
Yes.
In fact, you tell us in your statement that he turned away quickly when I came into the room, and these are your words to the police on the 23rd of November. I shouted and asked him not to take anything or to hurt me. That's what you shouted, isn't it?
Yes.
Because you were scared, understandably.
Yes.
Now, what I'm going to suggest to you, Mrs. Haines, is that under those circumstances, in the dark, very brief glimpse of the face, while you're shocked and scared, you could have made a mistake about who you were looking at.
Oh, I don't think so, dear.
That's all the questions I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, sometimes in a trial at this stage, prosecution counsel might very well re-examine on some of the points of evidence. But we haven't got time, because that's exactly right, Steve. Because I had a message to say we've only got 5 minutes. So I'm not going to do that. But in any event, just as a matter of interest, the only point I will probably have re-examined on is the evidence that the witness gave that took me by surprise, that this is an open plan house downstairs between the kitchen and the dining room. So I would have probably asked a couple of questions about that. Well, we've only got a few minutes left, and we promised you a vote in relation to guilty or not guilty. Just before that, Steve, I've got a couple of questions. Well, actually, there's one question here in front of me in relation to the sound and whether or not that would count as an actual confirmation, or whether the witness will be required to answer yes or no. What would you say is the answer to that, Steve?
When my wife says to me, "Are you going to put the bin out?" and I say, yeah, that's good enough for her. If it's good enough, I mean, she's the boss, obviously, and it's good enough for her, it's good enough for me.
Yeah. It was, and I think that's the point, isn't it? Is that when you were cross-examining, there was no doubt in your mind as to what the sound meant, and although occasionally judges have been known to require a witness to actually verbalise as they're saying, it's unlikely that the judge would have tried to interrupt your cross-examination by asking for that to take place. I think that's probably fair.
Well, it would break up the flow of the thing completely if after every question you insisted on a clear yes or no. And of course, the whole thing would take ages. So, no, it's good enough.
Mm-hmm. So, well now, the vote.
Just before the vote, I'm going to, of course, remind you of a little bit of what would have been in my closing speech about the burden and standard of proof. The prosecution bring this case, they have to prove it, and they have to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. Another way of saying that is they have to satisfy you so you are sure. And sure means exactly what it means in ordinary, everyday English. So if you think maybe Edward Fisher did it, you'll vote not guilty. If you think probably Edward Fisher did it, you'll vote not guilty. You only vote guilty if you're sure he did it. So if we go to the...
Just before we do that, of course, you will...
defense usually gets the last word in a trial.
And I'll just say there are 121 people watching this session, and we've only had 35 votes. So, and so far, I don't appear to have been a very compelling witness.
So yes, if you go to polls and just click yes or no, do you think Edward Fisher should be convicted based on Doris's account?
Given that she recognised it.
Steve, you're doing that thing again. Everybody knows what you're up to. Your behaviour is starting to become a little bit Trumpian.
Not going well for the crown here.
Right. Oh, dear.
We're currently 82% no, 18% yes.
Oh, Steve, you've managed to charm 18% of them. About part of the course, isn't it?
I blame the witness.
Yes, when I lose, I always blame the witness.
I think that's it, isn't it? I think we've, it's 10-2. I think we're done.
Yeah, we have a result. Edward Fisher is a free man and walks away from the courtroom without a stain on his reputation, and quite right too, if I may say so, members of the jury. You got it.
Thank you both very much.
Thank you. Pleasure.
Thank you, Lynda.
Really enjoyed it.
It was. Right.
Oh.
Is that the end of the session?
Yes. Yes. You made a note of the result, I take it.
What result, Steve? I blanked it
Really
in my mind
well
already.
done. Very, very well done. I can see there are still 88 people in the room. All that remains is to say thank you very much for being here, and thank you for casting your votes, and for, well, making me the winner, obviously. So thank you very much. I think that there is still a closing session to come. It's been an absolute pleasure doing this. I'm sure that we will be running more events in the future. It would be lovely to virtually see you again at those events. Have a very good weekend. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.